Hello and welcome to the Recruit Rockstars podcast, where we focus on the people part of private equity and venture capital companies. I'm your host, Jeff Hyman. And for today, I wanted to find someone who is in the operations, in the meat, the heart of private equity, someone who's involved in making these investments in different middle market companies, and has to deal with the talent on all kinds of fronts. And so I wanted to find someone like that. I did. And her name is Stacy Schlenk. Now, let me tell you about Stacy and her firm, which is HBM Holdings. So Stacy and the business are based in St. Louis, and they make investments, really long-term minded investments in mid-market businesses, everything from chemical to industrial. And by the way, these are global companies, not just U.S. companies. They're involved in transportation. They're involved in minerals and industrial equipment, all kinds of stuff. So really kind of bread and butter mid-market investments. And she has a very unique purview because she kind of sees the talent across all these businesses. And so I invited her on the show to kind of share some of her wisdom and some of her observations. Maybe we'll even get her to share some of the big mistakes that she sees CEOs make along the way. So with all that, welcome to the show, Stacy.
Thank you so much for having me.
That's great to have you on. Why don't we start at the 30,000 foot level? Tell us a bit about HBM. And as I understand it, it's kind of a different kind of investment firm. So maybe describe how it's a bit different than typical private equity shops.
Yeah, we do try to, we don't really describe ourselves as a private equity firm. We do take a long-term approach to any of our acquisition targets. We like to use the term buy and build. We want to be able to infuse capital and talent into those organizations in order for them to become more successful.
And is this is there a fund, or is this a deal at a time, or is this a family office model? What is the source of the capital?
Yeah, it's more of a family office model. So we were derived out of one of our portfolio companies, which we consider our legacy business, which was Mississippi Lime Company. So it's kind of a family trust, and we created the holdings company as a way to diversify the funds that were in that family trust.
And just so people have a sense of the scope and scale, can you share anything about just how many portfolio companies, how many people work at all these companies, et cetera?
Yeah, we currently have 4 businesses in our portfolio. And as far as employee headcount, we're just at 2,000 employees.
Got it.
Yeah.
But these are separate individual companies.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. And some I would assume at that size have their own HR functions and talent functions as well.
All of them do. So, and how we typically play with our portfolio companies is really we meet them where they're at. So some of our more mature businesses where they have very set procedures and standards and things like that, we don't work terribly too much with them. We're kind of there to kind of parachute in, help with projects, and then kind of parachute right back out.
Got it. So with that context set, let's talk about how you kind of think about the talent challenges or talent needs within these businesses. So these are, you said 2,000 people, so it's 500 people per company on average. So these are not startups, not early stage companies, but they're far from heavily resourced kind of companies.
Right.
What are some of the big talent related levers that these businesses can pull, should pull, you wish they pulled, to help those businesses scale successfully?
Yeah, I think some of the things, since all of our businesses are more manufacturing in nature, sometimes what you see is a workforce that's aging. And we see that in pretty much every one of our businesses. So we very much are encouraging some of our businesses that are newer to the portfolio to really look at different ways to help that labor workforce, the machinist, that skilled labor, to help them figure out, okay, what are you going to do when your folks start getting ready to retire in 10 or 15 years?
So proactively planning the workforce. And do you find that most of the portfolio companies know how to do that? Is that something that's in their DNA, or do you have to show them how to do it?
It's a little bit of both. I think they all have a good baseline of kind of what to do. And I think all of them are doing something, whether it be apprenticeships or internships or anything like that, to really be able to get in there. Our Mississippi Lime business is, they are probably the furthest along with what they're doing there. They're very involved with the local community where their largest plant and operations are. So they are hitting kids and students, from a pretty young age in that small community in order to really encourage kids to look at, one of the largest or one of the largest businesses in their local area as a potential employer in the future.
So they're actually getting ahead of the hiring needs by going upstream, so to speak, to find potential talent before they even need it. They're building their well, digging their well before they're thirsty.
Very much.
And do you find all companies do that, or do you find some don't and run into trouble when it comes to the workforce plan?
I think where we're at right now with our current portfolio, they definitely are starting to feel it. And the conversations are starting to happen where, okay, what are we going to do if we lose this, 30-year, tenured person within our organization due to retirement here? Yeah. And really figuring out how they can, look at things creatively and partnering with HR on what they can do in order to ensure that we're not going to have some sort of shortage in talent in the future.
You mentioned shortage of talent. Our listeners know that we're in probably the worst war for talent in 50 years. Give some color on what it looks like for your portfolio companies. How bad is it right now in terms of trying to land the best and brightest, whether it's an operations line person or whether it's an executive at headquarters?
Yeah, I think, it's, you can see the pain points at any level of the organization. I think, one of the things that we really pride ourselves on is the talent development piece. I think from a holdings company perspective, or maybe even a traditional private equity, you might not see that at all the various levels of the organization, like what we can provide. We're hitting our businesses, with frontline leadership training, mid-level. We do, talent events where we bring together our high potential talent across the enterprise of businesses in order for them to kind of network and grow. I think as far as bringing people in from the outside, I think when they hear our story, it resonates. It's a feel-good story, to be able to say kind of what we do and what we're trying to do.
What is unique about the story as you tell it to candidates that might be different than they would hear from other private equity firms or portfolio companies?
Yeah, I think, it's a couple of things. I definitely talk about the long-term hold strategy. Sometimes, depending on the level of candidate that I'm talking to, sometimes that resonates a little bit more with them, knowing
because they worry about a transaction and therefore losing their job, or why do candidates care about that? I know that sounds like an obvious question, but some candidates don't know much about private equity or long-term hold, short-term hold. What is it about that resonates with them?
Yeah, I think, unless somebody's been in the industry, the private equity industry, they don't fully understand. Sometimes, to kind of put it a little bluntly, I think they just know what they know off of TV and movies and think this is Pretty Woman and he's gonna, break apart the company and completely tear it apart. So I think
that's pretty sad. They get their education on private equity from Richard Gere and Pretty Woman, right?
I know. I'm probably using a pretty dated.
No, I think it's probably true.
But yeah, I think it's, knowing that we have this and, this push for talent development within the organization and the long-term hold, I think really resonates with them, and knowing that, okay, in 3 years, you guys aren't going to be looking at divesting my business.
Got it.
And in addition to that, I think, any of our portfolio companies, if they were a standalone business, probably wouldn't be able to do the things that we're able to provide, provide the capital for, improvements within, the business and, equipment upgrades and new sites and bolt-on acquisitions and things like that. So I think it adds a little bit of, interest factor as well.
You mentioned talent development that you have helped create across the different portfolio companies. Give some color as to what that consists of. So if I work at one of the portfolio companies, what kind of training am I getting, and why did you choose that specific topic?
Yeah, so some of the things that we've done is in the past couple of years is what we internally branded as leadership in action. So we partnered with an external vendor during that time, and they came in and facilitated training from everything for some of the more frontline supervisors to all the way up to even we had an executive team where we just cross-pollinated the leadership teams across the businesses and took them through this 2-day training. So it's things like the change model, how to give feedback, those are really the two big things. And how do you show up to your employees, so taking people outside of their comfort zone a little bit to really help them kind of take that step back and learn about how they can be a better leader in their organization.
Have you found that for most of those frontline managers, that was the first manager training and leadership development training they'd ever received?
Some of them, yeah. I think, like I said, with some of our businesses, being a little bit more further along, they've already done some, but we actually have partnered with DDI for 2020, and we'll start doing some additional training and providing certifications for some of our HR professionals at the businesses so that, that when they see a need really kind of crop up within the organization, that they can do it more in real time and help provide training.
Many of our listeners are CEOs of their own businesses, whether it's private equity backed, venture capital backed. Without naming names, when you think about leaders of these businesses that you've observed, kind of, you've been able to see the whole thing, current portfolio companies, previous portfolio companies, what are some of the most common mistakes that are made with regard to talent? And I define that broadly. What are kind of the few things that you see them do over and over that you're like, gosh, if they changed just this one thing, it would unleash a totally different level of performance in the business?
Yeah, I think, one of the things that I see is, because a lot of these organizations run really lean, sometimes it's hard for them to make a decision on a candidate. So I think, of course, as a recruiter myself, candidate experience is very important to me. So I want to make sure that, if we're, submitting candidates, and it's getting to the final stages that, we feel like they're strong enough to hire. And if we have, mixed expectations of what this person is or what they do within the organization and the hiring team, I think that's where things sometimes break down.
And just so I'm clear, so that's, the portfolio company's inability to pull the trigger. They're not sure that's the right person, or they can't close them. Help me understand.
I think it's a little bit more of the former. Sometimes within the organization, there might be different ideas of what they need in the organization and what somebody wants in the organization. So, one of the things that I constant communication with those leaders as I'm working on different requisitions for them is, making sure that I'm still staying on track for what they need in the organization and trying to make sure that everybody's on that same page.
How many people are involved in the hiring the interviewing process? In an ideal world, I'm sure it ranges by company, but what do you think is the right number?
I think it depends on the level of the position and the influence that is going to need to be involved for that role. If it's more, at the holdings company, sometimes we involve probably more people. We're a small office. We really want to make sure that culture fit is there. And since we're this customer facing, our customers are our businesses.
Sure.
So we really want to make sure that, they kind of see that in the right lens so that, we're not the type of holdings company where we're coming in and demanding, these are our policies. This is the HBM way. We really try to meet the companies where they're at and be able to provide the value that way, as opposed to coming in and changing their entire model.
And what about at the portfolio company level? How many interviewers do you find they typically have involved?
I think it depends on the business, in most cases, the portfolio companies, they will handle their own recruiting. And when I get involved is usually something that might need some additional attention or, a high priority position in order for me to be able to provide that additional focus on it. I think ideally, I don't like to bring people into the office more than 2 times.
Just from a candidate experience perspective, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think, it's important for people to really see and understand the organization. A lot of our businesses are in smaller communities, so we want to make sure, sometimes we're pulling people from a larger community that might be a little bit of a drive for them. So having them really understand kind of what this looks like and what the business is and isn't, is important. So I'm pretty honest and, candid with my candidates. Sometimes I think I think I usually get complimented on it. So I think
on the candidate experience, really?
Yeah. I mean, it's something that I really feel passionate about, in making sure that candidates are walking away, whether they got a job offer or not, that they still feel, that was still a good experience. I was still able to learn something about a company. Maybe I didn't get the job, but I can still walk away and, not be like, oh, they took forever to make a decision, or, they went radio silent for weeks. I don't want to provide that type of experience for somebody.
With things like Glassdoor, you can't afford to.
Right. Yeah.
Have you observed the impact of Glassdoor on the business or any of the portfolio companies where it actually kept candidates away?
I don't think so. I don't think that there has been terribly too much, kind of that negative publicity on those different sites. So we've been lucky so far.
I've seen a bunch of companies that have really wrestled with this, right? Because they have not focused on the candidate experience as you're describing, and it's really come back to bite them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Before we wrap up, one last question when it comes to compensation philosophy. So, your portfolio companies, I assume they pay market, but there's always someone that can pay more, right? Someone down the street, someone across the street that can pay more. What advice do you have for listeners that, have a budget, they can't break the bank to recruit the best talent, and they're up against these world famous companies with big brand names and big pockets that can pay a whole lot more? How do you still land the best talent beyond money? What do you do?
Yeah, I think, the benefits obviously are a big key in what we do. We work really hard with our companies to ensure that they're offering competitive benefits to the organizations or to the employees.
Yep.
Also the work-life balance, I think, is, just some of those soft things that you may not, necessarily see, written out in your offer letter, but that are things that are going to help you be able to grow and develop whether that's within one of our organizations or, to be able to help you really kind of springboard your career into something else.
The concept of work-life integration has taken on a whole new level of importance, hasn't it?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I think where I see it the most is within IT. There's a lot of expectations from IT professionals and, either remote work or, having a lot of flexibility. And
why is that? Why IT specifically?
I wish I had an answer to that. I think it has to do just with the tight market a little bit. So there's the competition for IT talent is just fierce, and you have to be on it with those candidates to ensure that you're getting the right person and the right fit. I think last I heard, the unemployment rate for IT professionals is between 2% and 5% or something. So
it is in some markets. It's unspeakable how difficult it is to recruit a software developer. I mean, it's unbelievable. Yeah. Well, Stacy, thank you so much for making the time. Before we wrap up, how can people learn more about HBM Holdings or get in touch?
Yeah, HBM Holdings, there's a couple of different options, just hbmholdings.com. We're fairly active on our LinkedIn page as well. And if anybody wants to contact me directly, there is our team page on our website, and they can find my contact information there.
Great. Thank you so much for making the time.
All right. Thank you so much.